What's up guys, Brad here. In part 2 of this Dirac tutorial series, I'll show you how to properly set your volume levels within the Dirac Live application. Then I'll walk you through the measurement process with some tips and tricks to make sure it goes smoothly for you. And finally, we'll wrap everything up by going over how to tweak the response to your liking before applying it to the Dirac Live Room Correction Suite. Let's get into it. So obviously it goes without saying that since this is part 2 in a 2-part tutorial series, if you haven't watched or seen part 1 yet, then I definitely recommend going to check that out now because you're going to be completely lost in this video. Now in that first video, I go over the things you'll need in order to follow along with this very tutorial series, including installing and setting up Dirac Live and the Dirac Live processor on your home theater PC, placing your measurement microphone, as well as some tips and tricks for making sure your receiver is good to go before taking measurements. You can check that video out in the card above or down in the description below. And I do want to give a huge thanks to the people over at Dirac for providing me software licenses and a measurement microphone for these tutorial videos and the review. Now I am working on a review video for Dirac Live and the Dirac Live processor, which are part of Dirac Live's Room Correction Suite, and that video will go over the actual software in far more detail and should be up soon. Now in full transparency here, they are not paying me anything to make these videos, but I do get to keep the software licenses and measurement microphone after I'm done. Now links to the software as well as where you can purchase a license and measurement microphone are in the description. And before we go any further, if you're new to the channel, consider clicking that subscribe button and ringing the bell icon so you never miss out on a new video. Also, be sure to check out the description below for affiliate links to items I use in this very video, along with other things like my full home theater setup. Now with that out of the way, let's dive into Dirac Live and get going. Alright, so to get started here, we still have the Dirac Live processor opened up, which is fine. Notice it says 5.1 surround, which is exactly what we want here. And then we'll just kind of leave this where it's at because Dirac will set our overall volume for us after we have a filter loaded up. I want to go ahead and access Dirac Live, not the processor. We'll click on that and it should open up Dirac Live 3. All right, and it's gonna ask us to select a device. So we're gonna select the Dirac Research. After we select that, I have my UMic listed here and my microphone, which is just my mini DSP hooked up. If you don't have a mini DSP hooked up, you won't see this here. So my microphone is the UMic 1, and you'll notice I don't have the calibration file loaded up. So I'll go ahead and click on that and I'll load from file, and then I'll basically find my calibration file, which I have right here, and I'll choose a 90-degree file because it's the way I have the microphone positioned, so it's pointing straight up at the ceiling. So I'll click on open, and then it'll take a moment to populate there, but now you can see the calibration file is loaded up. So we definitely want to make sure that you load the calibration file up for your UMic or whatever measurement microphone you're using. That's important. All right, so now let's move on to the volume calibration section. And this is actually pretty simple once you kind of wrap your head around what the whole point of this is. At first glance, it might seem like, you know, you're gonna play, you hit the play button down here and your system will play a tone, and then you wanna make sure that all of these are the same level. And well, you can do that. What it's really meant to do is provide Dirac enough volume when it goes to do the measurements where it's not too loud where it's clipping and it's not too low where it can't really detect anything. And I'll show you examples of that in a moment. We want basically the volume to be loud enough for the measurements that Dirac is doing to be audible to the microphone and kind of in that sweet spot. And for me, that sweet spot is normally around that -25 to -20 dB. So what I do here when I set this up, I set the mic gain to 100%, and then I bring up this to the -12.5 dB. Now you notice right away that this is gonna move this up really high. And even though, like, I'll hit the test tone here, and you know, we're hovering around -27 dB. I had to stop talking there because apparently I'm really loud. Basically, more or less a way for you to verify that you're going to be giving the Dirac Live measurements enough volume. You know, it's not gonna be too low, it's not gonna be too high. So let me show you an example of that. So I'm just gonna leave everything at default here, and I'm gonna turn my volume up until it reads maybe -15 dB here. All right, -16 is good enough. So I'm actually just adjusting the overall volume on the remote. Now you'll see that I have that set up. I'll play these other ones real quick just to show you they're all around the same volume. Okay, so as you can see, they're all registering around the same volume, give or take. Again, not really too important because Dirac is going to actually take all of the measurements and everything and then determine a level based upon all the measurements taken. So like I said though, if things are too loud or too low, it will let you know. So I'm gonna run through this little section real quick, and then I'm just gonna take the first measurement and you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. So here we see it says clipping detected. So this is exactly what I mean. So the volume is actually set up too loud for the measurements. The system won't let us set the volume too loud, and it won't let us set the volume too low. So I'll just go and like bring this all the way down to like something crazy. So it's like, you can barely hear it. It's like at -48. I'll again go back to measure, and then the only thing I found with this is it will get to the very end and then tell you that, oh, the volume was too low. Okay, so like I said, now it's telling us low signal to noise level. So that basically means that it's too low, it can't hear enough of the test tone itself to really give you the best reading, or actually take the best reading through the measurements. We'll dismiss this and we'll go back. One thing I do want to note is anytime you do this and go back, you'll notice that your volume, sometimes if it's up here, it will reset back to like -37.5, which is where it started. So again, I'll go back here and I'll go ahead and just set this to -12.5, but this time I'll hit play on the left-hand side here, and I'll set this to around where it's reading around -20 dB. And I'll also verify the subwoofer, because the subwoofer is normally one of the places where it will start clipping the most. Okay, so this is actually good. So see, it says -17.1. So what we can do with this here, and again, this won't affect our overall level after EQ and everything because Dirac will set that for us. We can adjust this, so even though this is reading -17.1, we can adjust it until it's reading that -20, and the overall output after all is said and done will not be affected because Dirac will calculate what the output should be set after EQ and its room correction algorithm does its thing. So what I'll do is I'll bring this down by about -3 dB, and we'll play it again. Okay, so that is now more in line with the other speakers. So we can move on from this. If you have any questions about this, leave them in the comments down below. Honestly, once you kind of understand that you're not setting the overall level here, you're just making sure that you're providing loud enough audio for Dirac without clipping, it becomes pretty easy and pretty easy to set and everything. So we're gonna go ahead and move on to arrangement selection. So up here we have a couple different options, and depending on your license that you have, this may be different for you. So by default, I believe it uses Studio, which is just the left and right channel. This is, I believe, just for the stereo configuration. And then under Home, we have a few different options. So if we select certain ones, we'll see, okay, tightly focused imaging. This is for, exact listening positions and tight room correction. So if you have a small chair that you sit in or a recliner that you pretty much never move from, then we have focused imaging, which is pretty much more in line with, I think, what most of us are used to. And that is, we have a sofa or something, but, we're really only concerned with, the area that we sit in, and we normally sit in the center. So like me, my wife will sit on, like the opposite sides of this. Honestly, she's not too concerned with how it sounds. But if you do have more discerning guests and you have people over constantly that are watching movies with you and stuff, and you are concerned about that, then wide imaging may be the best selection. And again, there's a bunch of descriptions over here for you to read that will help you choose the right one. But for this video, I'm gonna choose focused imaging. It even says over here that it is the most common measurement arrangement and the first you should try. At this point, we're ready to start taking measurement. I'm gonna click on proceed to measure. As you'll see here, it gives us all these little balls that we can click on, and these are all just positions. So obviously, main position is the starting position. And what I really like about this is you can select any point you want to measure right from the get-go. You don't have to start with the main position. So if you wanted to start on the far right side, you can do that. If you want to start on the front bottom right or the front bottom left, you can do that as well. It's really great because it allows you to adjust the mic stand and then say, I want to do all of these top measurements in one go. So I'll select this one, I'll do the measurement, I'll move the mic to the front top left, and then select this one, do that measurement. So it really kind of gives you the flexibility to go in any order that you choose. You just have to make sure that the right ones are selected. For this though, my mic is already in the main position at ear height. We can click on measure selected position, but we can also click on the stopwatch next to it and put a delay in, so it won't actually start taking the measurement until 2, 5, 10, or 15 seconds after you click that button. Really handy if you're kind of in the way, or if you're like me, I like to actually leave the room when I'm taking the measurements, because if I have to cough or anything, or I'm in the way, it might alter the measurement negatively. Not too much, but it's something that I like to do. I'm just gonna leave it on the off position here just for this video. So then I'll click on measure, select a position, and I'll let it do its thing. All right, so all of those measurements have now been taken, and you can see each individual channel here, which is really handy. So you got the left, right, center, LFE, left surround, and right surround. So you can quickly see the frequency response before correction, obviously, of whatever Dirac measured, which is honestly really cool. I like to see that right away. It's very responsive. You'll notice we have a couple of options down here in red that will allow us to clear the data for the position or remeasure the selected position. So if you're not home alone and other people live with you, and maybe during this measurement there was a knock on the door, or a door opened and closed or something, and if you feel like it maybe affected the measurement, you can remeasure it. You have to go through a bunch of hoops to do it, or wait to the end to redo it. You can do it right away. Now we can go and measure any one of these again. So for me, what I normally like to do, and I'll throw up a little time lapse right now to kind of show you me going through the process, is I like to basically measure all of the ear level ones first. So I measure the main listening position, then I'll measure the near left side, so just to the left of the listening position, and then the far left side, which is a little further. And then I'll also do the near right side and then the far right side. And then after that, I will raise the U-mic up, and I'll do the front top right, since I was already over in that section anyway. And then I'll do the front top left, and then I'll move to the back and do the back top right and the back top left. Then I will lower the mic and do the back bottom left. Instead of moving the mic back somewhere else, I can just move it down, and now I'm ready to do the back bottom left. Then I'll move it over and do the back bottom right. Then I'll do the front bottom right and front bottom left. So you can quickly run through all of those measurements pretty easily. I would definitely recommend doing all of them. You don't have to. I think you'd benefit the most from doing all of them. So after you've done all that, we'll go ahead and click on Proceed to Filter Design. At the bottom here, you'll see Designing Phase Correction Filter. It's automatically gonna save all of this to a group. So, and the one thing I will say before I go on is take your time doing the measurements. Don't rush through them. Don't, just knock the microphone over or have it kind of like, tilted. Make sure that it's still straight up, and just take your time with it. The more time you take doing it means that you won't have to do it again. Save the time later by spending the time now. All right, so now we've moved on to the filter design, and as you can see, we got a lot of information here. It may seem a little daunting, but not really. So by default, Dirac has their own default curve, which is this, where it starts up a little higher, moves down. This is kind of a very typical curve that you would see because you want a little more bass and have it slope down a little bit. It just, the way our ears perceive sound, this can be more pleasing than if we just were to have a flat curve. And then if we look on the right hand side, we see we have groups. So we have group 1, which is our left and right, group 2, which is our center, group 3, which is our LFE or subwoofers, and group 4, which is our left surround and right surround. If we want to change a target curve for this, say we come up here and we want to do that, like we just, this is just for example, I would never do this. It's only going to affect the left and right surround. If I go over to LFE or any of the other ones, it's not going to affect that. It's only going to affect the group that you selected. So what's great though, is if you'll notice now, if I move center into this group here, now all of those speakers are selected. And what this means is it's pretty easy to select groups of speakers and adjust their overall response. So if you want, if you have a really weird sound at like say, this area, you could bring that down and it will only affect the center, left surround, and right surround. I've added this to the group, but if I didn't want it in the group anymore, I could just drag it out into an open area there. And then now the center channel is back in a group by itself. And then whatever we've done here will still be here. So if you really screw things up and you're going too crazy with all this stuff, you can always just revert everything back to default by clicking on the little hamburger button up here, set default curve, and then just select all groups. And that will just reset everything back to the default. You also notice I have curtains turned on, which are these little pink things on the left and right. You can turn those off down here. But basically this allows you to say, set a curtain at, 500 hertz. But also what's really cool is say you want a house curve. Well, you could go in here and manually adjust all this stuff and go crazy with that. But what's really cool is you could actually load up somebody else's house curve that you download online. So my buddy Youthman on his website actually has a zip file with a bunch of different Harman curves in it that I'm gonna link to in the description. It's what I used to really save a ton of time. All you gotta do is download those, unzip them, we'll click on load target curve, and I'm gonna click on all groups, and that's gonna load it up for all groups. And on my desktop, I have my Dirac Live files, and in there I have my Harman target curve. So my favorite curves is this Harman 10 dB target curve. So I'll open it up, and you'll notice it creates this curve here. So we got basically plus 10 dB, and then it starts sloping down, and then it's relatively flat across the board there. So this is a very popular house curve, and it's actually what I typically use. And you'll notice all of these groups now have it, and that's very important. You wanna make sure that all the groups have the same curve applied. You know, you don't want your fronts to have this target curve, but then your surrounds not having it. Also, you want the LFE curve to match that as well.
What's up guys, Editor Brad here with a little clarification. Now, while matching every speaker curve is the ideal thing to do, there may be instances where you want to boost or cut certain frequencies depending on your situation or room. The most important thing to remember, however, is that frequencies below 120 Hz do need to match across all your speakers. Otherwise, your bass and subwoofer response won't be as good as it could be.
All right, so from there, I'll leave the target curve here. I'll proceed to filter export. So you notice we have 8 slots over here. So what that means is if I click on the first one, I can label this house curve, and then I could just say 10 dB HC. So just a quick description, I know what that means. So when I click on export filter, you'll see it's exporting that filter to slot 1 on the Dirac Live processor. If we go to the Dirac Live processor, right here we have our house curve, and you'll notice this little toggle here. That means you can actually turn it on and off at will. You don't need to close the program and then open it to get it to turn back on. And you'll notice we have all of this information here on the right, so it'll tell us what it set our gain to on all of our stuff, the delay that it did as well. And we also have the option to toggle any of those off. So in real time, you could actually hear what the delay compensation is doing for your sound and what the gain compensation is doing for your sound. Okay, I have a house curve on 1. Let me go ahead and load that default curve again, because maybe I want to flip back and forth between them to see which one I like better. I'm gonna go, I clicked on that, I loaded that default curve, so all of my speakers have that default curve applied. I'll proceed to filter export. I'll click on 2, label this default curve, and then I'll just say Dirac default curve. I'll export filter again. If we go back over there, now we have both of these. And again, what's great about this is not only can you toggle them on and off, but you could switch back and forth between them really quick. So if you have like a movie playing or music playing, you'll actually hear the difference between these two curves in real time as you switch back and forth. So really, really cool. I will touch on one thing real quick that I want to cover because I think it's important. So if you are like me and you want to have a house curve, when I loaded that house curve file up, you'll notice something that I didn't really touch on, and that is this right here. So basically, Dirac will only boost the volume to a certain extent. It won't boost it to the point where you could potentially damage something or hurt something. And you'll notice that our subwoofer, even though we've boosted it up here, it's not reaching that area. You can also use the mouse wheel to zoom in, and then you click, kind of drag around to navigate that.
Hey guys, Editor Brad here again, and I definitely know that I said subwoofer, but I'm looking at the left and right front channels, and there's a reason for that. Because the Dirac Live processor is a software-based solution and not loaded onto a receiver or pre-pro, it has no way of knowing what type of speakers we have or what our crossovers are set at. For all it knows and sees based on the measurements it's taken, every single speaker in my system is a full range speaker. And that's because when it sends out the measurement signal, the subwoofer is playing back the tones below the crossover point. So basically, Dirac is seeing the combined response of the subwoofer and each speaker as one whole full range speaker, not a separate speaker and subwoofer. That's why we need to take into account the response of each speaker in regards to bass when applying a house curve or any EQ really, as the readings and corrections do affect the subwoofer too, not just the speaker.
So you'll notice if we uncheck the measured one here, you'll notice that we're not really achieving the 10 dB that we need right here. And the reason for that is our volume on our subwoofer is actually set too low overall, not within the Dirac software, but within either the receiver or the subwoofer volume themselves. So in this case, if I wanted to use this, before you add your house curve, and actually before you do the measurements, you need to adjust the volume so you have enough headroom on those subwoofers where it doesn't really need to boost really at all, or maybe just a little bit, and it can smooth this out and bring the volume up here. Otherwise, you're gonna deal with these dips here, and like while this is closer to the actual house curve, it's still not ideal. And we can actually see that if we go to the subwoofer itself, and the subwoofer is gonna look a little different, and it actually is going to affect all the speakers as well. So that's definitely something you wanna take into account. If you're going to apply a house curve like this, then you're gonna want to try to kind of tweak your subwoofer volume so you have enough headroom before you take your measurements. And then once you get to this point, you won't have to worry about missing out on all of this information there. So there you have it. You should now have your filters in place within the Dirac Live processor, and your output is the Dirac Live corrected audio. Now, like you saw yourself, you can flip these on and off to hear the differences in real time, and you can save multiple filter profiles and switch between them at any time, so you can hear the difference as well. Super, super cool. If you enjoyed this video and found it helpful, feel free to give it a thumbs up. Now, if you have any questions about the steps I covered in this video, or if you have Dirac Live yourself and cannot live without it, I have to know. So leave me a comment down below. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.